Welcome back to the Flyin Miata installation videos. My name is Mike Esri, and today I'm going to show you how to install our sway bars in your NC Miata. Before we get started, let's talk about the parts and pieces that we'll be installing today. So in this video, we're going to cover both the front and the rear sway bar installation. You might have just purchased one or the other, or if you got both of them, good deal, we've got you covered. So with our full sway bar kit for the NC, we have the larger front sway bar. We have the slightly smaller and kind of more squiggly rear sway bar. And then we also have some bushings, brackets, and also at least one little tube of grease. So if you don't have all of these components, please give us a call. That way we can get you taken care of. But these are the parts you'll need at the very least to do the sway bar installation. Let's cover the basic tools that you're gonna need to be able to install our sway bars on your NC Miata. So, in no particular order, I have over here some power tools. You don't have to have these. This is just a nice to have, not a need to have. But you will need to have some screwdrivers, some ratchets, some open-ended wrenches, some sockets, and primarily we're looking for sizes like 8, 10, 12, 14 millimeter sizes here. For the screwdrivers that I have a Phillips, I have a flathead. Most of this is going to be used for prying, driving, getting some of the plastic rivets out of the plastic under tray. I do have some extensions for my sockets. That does make getting access to a couple of the bolts a little bit easier. Again, nice to have, not need to have. I do also have a trim removal tool. This is another one that's nice to have for some of the plastic rivets. We don't specify this in the installation instructions, I don't believe, but I do recommend getting a metal bristle brush. This does make cleaning out the threads on your end links much easier and easier to get the nuts off. Highly recommended. I also have a couple of picks here, again for the plastic rivets. Seems to be a common trend with most of these tools so far. I have a 5 millimeter Allen wrench. You will need this to be able to hold the studs on your stock end links in place, so that way you can loosen the nuts. And then over here, I have some torque wrenches. So you will need to have at least a small to medium-sized torque wrench. We're gonna be doing torque values as low as about 12 or 13 pound-feet up to about 45 pound-feet. So it doesn't need to be anything major. I guess actually including getting your lug nuts tightened after you have everything done. If you take your wheels off, you'll need to go up to 85 pound-feet. And then lastly, I have some WD-40. Just some kind of a penetrant. You can use PB Blaster, you can use whatever other penetrant you want to use for getting the hardware on your old end links and sway bars loosened up, so that way you can get the new stuff on. But overall, basically stuff that you probably already have in your toolbox, so pretty straightforward. Now that we've talked about some of these tools here, let's go ahead and we'll jump into the installation. Now we're ready to actually get started working on the car. So to get prepared, we do need to get the car up in the air, so that way we have access to all the components. In this particular case, I'm going to show you with the wheels off. You do need to take the fronts off for sure. The rears, actually, you can do the rear sway bar install without even jacking the car up if you have stock height suspension. But to make this easy to see, we're going to get the car up in the air on the lift. I'm going to take all the wheels off, and then I'll show you how to do both the front and the rear sway bar installation. We're gonna start with the rear sway bar actually, because it's easier to do than the front sway bar and quicker. But before I do any of that, the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna clean up the threads for our end links. So these are under the car, they're exposed threads, and even though this is a relatively low mileage NC, they still have dirt and grime and other things on them, because that's just how it is under the suspension of cars. So first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna brush off all the threads. You would be surprised at how much easier this makes your life by getting these nuts off if you brush the threads out. So brush off both ends of your end link, and then I'm gonna follow that up with a little bit of WD-40 or PB Blaster or whatever your favorite flavor of penetrant is, just to make your life a little bit easier. Because we're doing both front and rear sway bars, I'm actually gonna do this job for all 4 end links on the car, and then we'll come back here to actually get this rear sway bar uninstalled. Now that we have the threads on the end links all cleaned up, we can go ahead and remove this rear sway bar. You only need 3 tools to be able to do that. 5mm Allen, 14mm open end wrench, and a 12mm ratchet socket. So let's get started. So these guys, they do have this 5mm Allen keyway. You can see my Allen wrench fits right in there, but I'm gonna put my closed end wrench on here first, and you can, either way, this will give you a little bit more leverage to hold it like this. But I'm gonna hold the Allen wrench, and then I'm gonna break the nut loose. There we go. So now that I've broken that loose, I usually don't need to have the Allen wrench in place to be able to get it off the rest of the way. Yep, that's coming off pretty easily. Yours may not be coming off quite as easily, so if you need to, use your Allen wrench to hold that in place and continue moving your ratchet. Okay, so I have this off. I just threaded it on a couple of threads. That way I don't lose this nut. In this case, we are going to reuse these end links. If yours are in good shape, if you're not lowering the car dramatically, you can reuse your stock end links. If you are lowering your car significantly or you need to replace your end links anyway, we do have some adjustable end links that are ball joint style just like the factory ones are. So if you're gonna go to use those when you do this job, you don't need to keep your hardware for the stock end links. But in this case, I'm gonna hang on to it. So, since I'm gonna reuse these, I'm just gonna leave this end link here, spin the nut back on a couple of threads, and now we're gonna move to the other side. Now that we have the end links disconnected from both ends of the sway bar, we can actually take it out of here. So the rear sway bar is really simple, and this is true for most Miatas, but especially on the NCs. You can see that we have 2 nuts, one on top, one on bottom of this bracket, and then the same thing over here. So once we take those nuts off, the brackets will be loose and the rear sway bar can be removed. So this is a 12mm socket, and of course on these 12mm head nuts. So these nuts, we will be reusing both the nuts and the brackets. So keep these guys, again, just so that way I don't lose them. I'm gonna thread these nuts on a couple of threads. That way I know exactly where they are. Now let's do the other side. All right, and now you just have to thread this guy out from over the top of your exhaust, and that's it. That is your spindly rear sway bar, and we won't be needing that anymore. All right, now it's time to install some new shiny parts. I have our new rear sway bar. I also have the new polyurethane bushings and a packet of grease. You only need 1 packet of grease to do all 4 corners. So I'm only gonna use a little bit, a quarter literally of this packet for each bushing. You do want them well lubricated, but a little packet like this goes a long way. So first things first, what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna set this bar down for a moment. I'm gonna lube up these bushings. So open up your grease packet. And then I'm just going to squirt a little bit of lubricant in here. Again, roughly a quarter of the package, or that's probably not even quite a quarter of this little packet that we got. And I'll do the same on this other bushing. There we go. And see, I still have plenty of that grease there. And now, I like to give this a little bit of a helping hand by getting it squished around in these bushings. And I like to use a little screwdriver. You can use your finger or a stick or whatever. This lubricant is very, very sticky. It's a hydrophobic style grease. A lot of people call it marine grease, but that helps it to adhere better to the bushings and to the sway bar. All right, so as mentioned, this grease is very, very sticky. So be careful if you're touching it with your fingers or using your fingers to spread it on there. Just like anti-seize, this will get everywhere and it's hard to get off. So keep a cloth handy to wipe your tools off. And now, these are ready to go. So, taking our sway bar, and it has some very squiggly bends in it. It should be pretty obvious on this car which way it gets installed. The fronts of these legs point towards the front of the car, and then looking at the bar, it has a little bit of a swoop to it. This is going to be what gets offered up to the rear subframe. So just like the stock rear sway bar, we're going to carefully offer this up into position, just like so. And then you can see how I have it positioned here. There's a little bit of a flat in between this bend and the main kind of forward bend of the sway bar. This is where our bushing is going to go because it's right where our bracket is located. So what I'm going to do now is just carefully balance it like that. Our bushings are split, so I can actually open it up and stick this around our sway bar. Now it doesn't really matter if the slot is up or down. What really matters is that this flat side is facing towards the subframe. So I'm going to go on this straight section here, open it up, squeeze it around. I also like to give it a little bit of a rotation there just to make sure that that grease is nicely squished onto the sway bar. And I'm going to do the same thing on this other side. There we go, just like that. Okay, so now, if you have your brackets and retaining nuts still on there, take them off temporarily. And now, we're gonna fit the sway bar up into place. Like so. And then our stock brackets, just like the rubber bushings that came off, these have little grooves that the new bushings will sit in between the brackets themselves. And I'm just going to get a couple threads started for these so I can move to the next side. All right. And then same thing on this side. All right, so now the sway bar is loosely held in place and you can see I can rotate it. Now we just need to tighten down these nuts and then we can work on getting the end links reattached. So, tighten up these 12 millimeters. All right, we've got the brackets back in place. I've got them run down, so the nuts are actually holding the brackets up against the car. I'm gonna torque them in place. The torque spec for these nuts is 12 to 19.5 pound-feet. So I'm gonna shoot for right in the middle, about 15 pound-feet, get these snugged up and actually torqued down. The Flyin Miata sway bars actually have multiple mounting holes for the end links, and that's what gives them an adjustable bias for your front to rear handling bias. So in this particular case, this car, I want it to be set up for a relatively neutral handling bias. So to do that for the rear sway bar, I'm going to choose the middle mounting hole. So let's go ahead and get this on here. We have our end links back on, have the nuts run down. Now it's time that we torque them up. They are supposed to be torqued from 32 to 45 pound-feet. So let's go ahead and get them torqued down to spec. If you have a hard time getting these nuts to actually torque down to spec without the ball joint and stud spinning with the nut, you may need to resort back to your 14mm wrench and your 5mm Allen, and then just go by feel. Luckily, I was able to get at least a couple of these tightened down with a torque wrench where the stud wasn't moving. So I'm going to go off of that feel for how tight that nut is, and then tighten down the other ones so that way they're nice and snug and don't loosen up. And that's it. Rear sway bar has been installed. The last thing that you want to do that is a good idea, just because of this grease that we installed, how sticky it is that if you have any excessive amounts of grease on either side of your bushing, I like to just use a little rag, wipe it up, just because usually, if you have a whole bunch anyway, this is where you'll get a lot of excess dirt and grime that will build up and stick to that grease over time. All right, we're done with the rear. Let's go ahead, we'll work on the front sway bar next. Before we actually get started with the sway bar itself, we need to remove some plastic panels so that way we can get access to the sway bar here in the front. So to do that, we're gonna start by removing these inner lower splash panels. So you can see that there's some plastic rivets here on the top and the sides that hold it here in the wheel well. And then also down here below, we have some little 8mm head screws and then some more plastic rivets that hold the front portion of it in place. So these little plastic rivets, they have a center section and an outer section, and we need to get underneath the middle and kind of pry it up and pop it like that. Once we have that out of the way, then the rivet comes right out. And sometimes they break. Unfortunately, you can't save them all. Now, we have a few more fasteners up front here that are metal screws. You can either use a Phillips head or you can use an 8mm socket. I'm gonna whiz them off with a power tool because it's quick and easy. And then lastly, we have two more plastic rivets right here, just like the ones inside the wheel well. Just have to pop these ones off. This one actually has a threaded middle portion. It's actually slightly broken too. But if I unscrew it, the middle section pops out and the base should stay stationary. There we go. Yep. Sometimes you may need to get the drastic measures and use your trim removal tool. So we're really close. I forgot one. Make sure that you do this one up in the corner, because that's the last one that holds this particular lower panel in. There we go, just like that. you might catch it, unlike what I did. But it is plastic, so unlikely to do any damage. But there is our lower inner splash guard out of the way. And now we have access to more of the middle tray, which we will get at after we've done the other side. This one was missing a couple of fasteners here, so that's it. I'll try to find some fasteners to put back in there when we're done, but for now, that's both of our lower splash panels out of the wheel wells out of the way. To get the central under tray off of these cars, we've got some 8mm bolts here on the front. We have some M10s right here on the back, and then we have two M10s on each side. So I will start by zipping off the 8mm bolts that are also Phillips on this particular one if you wanted to. Now, since I'm down here, I'm going to get these two M10s. Here in the wheel wells, we actually have two more bolts that we need to get to. There's a M10, M10. But before we do so, we also want to get this ABS wire unhooked from the tray. I like to use a trim removal tool to get up underneath this little flange and wiggle it back and forth a little bit. You will need to pry, but be careful, it is plastic. There we are. And that pops that right out of the way. And now, with a long extension, I can just get to these two bolts. And this side's done. Now we can move on to the other side, do the same exact thing. Here we are on the other side, and just in case this affects you, because it's different from this car, there actually is another little hole up here that is kind of hidden. And oftentimes it will have a plastic push pin or rivet that's holding this front piece into the frame rail. This car doesn't have them. I think that somebody else has been in here and removed them. But in case you start taking out your under tray and it's stuck on the front, it's probably because you have these plastic push pins up on the front of both sides. So make sure to check it. If you have them, take them out. Now we have all of the fasteners removed from this under tray and it's just loose. So because it's plastic, all I'm gonna do is just start carefully pulling it out from behind the bumper cover and around all the suspension components and the subframe. And again, if you find that you're pulling too hard on something, it's probably because you forgot a fastener. So stop and check to see if you have any fasteners that are still holding your tray in place. There we go, just like that. Now we have easy access to all of the underside of the subframe, and we can see all of our sway bar. So next step, we're gonna get those end links off so that way we can get the sway bar out. Okay, now it's time to do the front sway bar. And just like the rear sway bar, we're gonna loosen up the end links and get those off of the ends of the sway bars first before we loosen up and remove the brackets that hold the sway bar to the chassis. If you're reusing your stock end links, you don't have to remove this bolt. I like to get it a little bit loose just so that way I have a little bit more wiggle room. And I'm gonna set my end links just on top of the control arm. Let's move over to the other side and we'll do the other one. Now that the end links are off, we can focus on getting the brackets off of the front sway bar. These have 14mm nuts rather than the 12mm nuts that we had on the rear. So get out your 14mm socket and we'll get to loosening these up. Be careful that as the sway bar comes down, that it doesn't crash into some of these pipes and lines that may actually get damaged or bent. I have the nuts removed from the brackets on both sides, so now this sway bar is loose. I can actually pull it straight off, and I'm just going to gently lay it down. It's okay if it sits on top of those hoses and other lines as long as you're not banging into them. But now, to make this a little bit easier, I'm going to preemptively remove the brackets and the rubber bushings that are split just like that, just to get some of the bulk out of the way for when I do remove this sway bar. And I'll do that on both sides. We have the front sway bar out of place, have the brackets and the bushings off of both sides of the sway bar, so now we're ready to actually remove it from the car. This part is a little bit of an awkward song and dance to get it out of the car, but it's not too bad. There's a step-by-step process to get it out, and I'll show you how it's done. The first thing that I like to do to make this job a little bit easier is also remove this bracket that holds the ABS wire or the wheel speed sensor wire onto this part of the subframe. This will give us a little bit more wiggle room. So I'm going to take this off just to move this out of the way on both sides of the car. This is a 12mm bolt. And just set it up on top of your upper control arm. Same thing over here. Now the next trick that we need to do is that this leg of the sway bar on both sides, we want to actually get it up and over the top of our tie rods here. So to do that, and to get enough articulation and movement in here, because we're actually working with a relatively small amount of wiggle room, is that we need to turn the wheel or turn the steering rack to point the wheels left or right, depending on which side we're getting out first. So I'm going to actually work on getting the driver's side out first. So to do that, I'm going to push this wheel as if I'm turning the car left. And just a little bit, just to get started. And if you have trouble turning the wheel, put your key in the ignition and turn it to the accessory position. There is a steering lock, and that will make this extremely hard, if not impossible, to turn your wheels. Now, I'm going to wiggle this guy up and around and get it in position. And you will need to kind of force it up and push it against some of the hoses a little bit, but you can see that I'm able to just push it up and over in front of our tie rod end here. And now we have this side ready to go. Moving over here to the right side of the car, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to turn the wheel as if I am back to center. I'm going to finagle our sway bar a little bit more this direction, just like that. And now I'm going to continue turning the wheel or the steering rack as if I were turning the car to the right. And then same procedure here. Drop down the other side, wiggle, 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 get this up on top of the stud a little bit for the bracket. And then this side comes down and forward of our tie rod. So now that I've got both legs of our sway bar in front of the tie rod arms, now I can start wiggling this out towards the left side of the car. There we are, just like that. Stock sway bar, you're out of here. Now it's time to put the shiny in the engine bay. This is our new front sway bar. And on the NCs anyway, we've got both ends that are parallel to each other, so there's not a up or a down that you have to worry about. They are perfectly symmetrical. And just like the stock sway bar, I'm gonna feed it in the way it came out, basically, which is from the left side of the car. So carefully guide your sway bar through. And out to the other side. There we go. The new sway bar is in position, and we have the feet of the new sway bar in front of our tie rod ends. So reverse of removal to get this in place, to get it over behind the tie rods, is we'll do it one side at a time, just like we did when we removed the stock sway bar. So I'm gonna start on this side, actually, because we're already turned this way a little bit. So I'm gonna push it all the way over here to this side and gently pull up, get that leg over. There we go. Now I'm gonna walk the sway bar back towards the middle a little bit, turn my steering back to the middle, and then kind of work it over a little bit more towards the right-hand side of the car. And then continue turning the wheels. There we go. And then same story over here. We're going to carefully push, pry, maneuver as best we can. There we are. And now, we are back in place where they should be to actually be bolted into the car. The next step in getting the new front sway bar in the car and installed is to grease up our polyurethane bushings. So, using the same grease that was supplied, I'm just going to squirt a little bit of this lube in there. There we go. And then use my screwdriver to spread that all on the inside of our bushings. Got our bushings all lubed up, have our new brackets that were included with the front sway bar. So these go on just the same way that the old ones came off the original bar. They do have a split in them, just like the rear ones do, and just like the factory ones do. And of course, the flat side of the bushing goes against our subframe. So on the front sway bar, you can see there's kind of a preliminary bend, a secondary bend, and then you have the straight section of the bar that goes between the left and the right. Our bushing is basically going to be installed right up against this curvature. There we go. And then spin it around a little bit just to spread the lube around. And then our bracket goes on here like so. And then up onto the studs with the original nuts that hold the bracket in place. And you'll notice that these new brackets are slotted. And I'm not going to tighten these nuts down just yet because we do have a little bit of movement. Then we'll want to make sure we get these sway bars in their happy home before we tighten them down. Okay, so this side's ready to go, at least in position for now. So let's do the other side. All right, same procedure. Bushing first. There we go, right at the crux, or right next to where that turn is. Give it a little bit of a rotate to smoosh the grease around. And then bracket and over the studs. So another thing to note before we get these nuts tightened down, we don't want to forget about our ABS wire and where it attaches to the bracket. So before we get too much further, let's get that taken care of. I'm just gonna snug down these nuts that hold the bracket in place, and then we'll come back and torque them once we have everything in its new home. All right. One thing to note, as I'm tightening down this other bracket, you might have seen that the bushing was a little bit open, deformed on this side as I was tightening down. Since I already tightened down the other side, that is okay. One of the reasons why these are right at the bends of this sway bar is so that way as the sway bar rotates and it's being used when you're under normal driving conditions, you don't want the sway bar to be able to slide left and right. So having these bushings right up against the corners of this sway bar helps keep it located. So it will be a little bit tight, but as long as you can rotate it like this, and it's only gonna be moving a little bit like this anyway, you're good to go. So now, let's get these nuts torqued down to spec. Torque spec for these front nuts is 26 to 37 pound-feet. So let's get them torqued to spec. Lastly, for our sway bars to be fully installed, we need to get the end links into the end of the sway bar. So the front sway bar has 2 mounting points, or mounting holes. As I mentioned for the rear one, I'm aiming for a neutral handling bias. So to match that on the front, I'm actually gonna use the furthest mounting hole for this front sway bar. So I'm gonna push this up, get my end link in position here. And onto the other side. Torque spec is 32 to 45 pound-feet, so let's get that taken care of. I got lucky and I was able to use the torque wrench to tighten all 4 of the nuts for my end links. If you're not so lucky and they spin on you, use the trusty 14mm and your 5mm Allen to hold them in place so that way you can get them snugged down. One final thing I like to do, just like on the rear, now that I've got everything in place, any excess grease, wipe it up. All right. Get everything cleaned up, everything's tightened down, torqued up, ready to go. The last thing we need to do is put our splash panels back on, put our wheels on, and then we're ready to go enjoy our new sway bars. Let's reinstall this center under tray and get it back up into the car. And they do need to go between the body colored piece of your bumper cover and above these little tabs. Okay, so we have this loosely in position. Now we can actually start putting the fasteners in. Gonna get these 2 back ones first, just to get the under tray from flopping so much. And just gonna get them started loosely. That way I still have room to maneuver this around if I need to line the other ones up. There we are. And then let's get the 8mm ones in the front here. So I'm not going to do the most outside one because that's going to attach to our other fender liner. I'll do the next one in. Here we go. Now that I have these four tightened up, I just actually reverted back to using a little wrench. That way it didn't strip out the plastic. I'm gonna go ahead and tighten up these 10mm bolts, just like that. And finally, we have the two 10mm head screws over here. And then lastly, if you have it, put your little plastic rivet up here into this piece. I'm missing it, so I'm gonna skip it on this car, but it's not going anywhere if you don't have it, so don't feel too bad. But now that we have this side buttoned up, let's move over to the other side. Now we get to reinstall the right-hand side splash tray. This guy just gets fed up in here and it goes underneath this upper splash panel. Here we are. So you should start to see things lining up a bit. There we are. And before I get any of these really started, I'm gonna get one of my push pins just to kind of help locate this panel. I'm gonna use this one. Now I'm gonna do the three little screws underneath on the front here. And just like we did up here, make sure that these tabs are underneath this new panel. And get your screw started. Again, a light snug, don't go crazy. Plastic threads and all. Actually, leave these just a little bit loose. That way you can maneuver this panel a little bit if you need to. There we are. Okay, so now we have everything relatively in position for where we want it. So before I actually snug these up, now I'm going to come back up here and do the rest of these little plastic clips. That way I can have everything in place before I actually tighten these down. And remember, if any of these little clips broke on you while you were removing them, hopefully you've got replacement ones. They don't have to be identical. I'm going to use some of these screw center style plastic rivets instead, since that's what I have on hand. And they're the right size to fit. That's it for up in here. Now let's go back underneath and we'll get everything tied up down there on the bottom. And remember that there's also two little plastic clips here. So we're going to get those installed. And then another one of the other clips that I had laying around. There we go. So those in place. Come back here and tighten these three bolts. And that's it. This side is done. Let's go do the other side. All right, and as I tighten down these three last screws, now that I've got all the other plastic rivets in place, this completes our splash pan, under tray, wheel liner adventure. And lastly, we just need to bolt the wheels back on, let the car down, we're done. Last step, torque the lug nuts down to 85 pound-feet. And with that, our sway bar installation is concluded. So hopefully you were able to follow along and get your own sway bars installed on your NC Miata. Last thing to do, go drive the car and enjoy it. So pretty straightforward overall. Hope that you learned something. The one thing that we will touch on now is that with those adjustment holes on the sway bars, you can do a little bit of handling bias tuning, meaning that you can make the car feel a bit more towards the side of understeer or oversteer, depending on where you have your end links mounted in which holes in which sway bar. So if you stiffen up the front sway bar, meaning that you move them from the outermost holes forward to the next two holes, you can stiffen up that front sway bar. That'll make your car actually tend a bit more towards the understeer side, making it feel a little bit more planted up until the point where basically when you turn the wheel, you don't get that feedback of the car actually making any kind of movement left or right. So that's a little bit safer for people that aren't used to driving fast or are looking to do something that maybe they're sawing at the wheel like autocross. Actually, there's a lot of guys that like to run a heavier front sway bar because of that. On the other side of the spectrum, you can do a bit more oversteer, and oversteer is where you're basing some of that handling bias towards the rear. So if you were to stiffen up the rear sway bar by moving those attachment points from the middle hole towards the center of the bar, that will stiffen up that rear sway bar, make it feel a bit more oversteery, meaning that the car is going to want to have the back end of the car come out a little bit faster than it would normally. And if you like oversteer, especially if you're into drifting or something along those lines, you might prefer that. And you can of course tweak the rear bar with the 3 different settings a little bit, and it's a slightly more fine tuning tool than the front bar is, since it's a smaller sway bar anyway. So my recommendation is that if you'd like to play with that, go out to your local track, your local autocross, change the settings one at a time, go drive a few laps, see how it feels, see how you like it, and play with it a little bit. You won't know what you don't like until you try it with your handling bias, but with these settings that I've shown you in the video, this is a pretty neutral setting most people will enjoy. And with that, that's the end of our video. Thanks again for watching. I hope that you learned something. If you have any questions about this installation process that we didn't cover in the video, feel free to give us a call, send us an email. You can reach out via Facebook and Instagram, and we'd be happy to help you out. And of course, always check out the installation instructions, which we will have linked below if you need any further specifics on this installation process. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next time.